You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life.
If you're seeing 3, 6, or 9 right now, if those numbers have been following you, appearing at moments that feel too precise to be random, you need to understand something clearly. This is not happening by accident. And what you're about to hear will permanently change how you understand reality, whether you accept it or not. But first, you need to understand what this transmission actually is and why it doesn't last forever. You know that feeling. You glance at your phone and it's 3:33. You don't react. Later you grab coffee and the total is 3.69. Interesting. Then you're driving home and you're stuck behind a car with 369 on the license plate. The first time it happens, coincidence. The second time, curiosity. But by the 5th or 6th time, something inside you shifts. You stop laughing it off. You stop explaining it away. You start wondering if maybe, just maybe, something is trying to get your attention. I remember the exact moment that shift happened for me. It was a Tuesday morning. Nothing special. I woke up naturally at 6:39 without an alarm. At the time, I didn't think much of it. If you reverse those numbers, it becomes 9:36. But that realization came later. I made breakfast, sat down with my laptop, opened my email. The very first message in my inbox had a timestamp of 3:33. The subject line was about a project I'd been avoiding for months. Something I knew I needed to start. Something I felt drawn toward, but kept postponing. As I read that email, a certainty washed over me. Not a thought, not a belief, a knowing. This is it. Start now. I looked at the clock again. 9 o'clock exactly. No more excuses. No more waiting for the perfect moment. I started immediately. 3 days later, I received a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years, completely out of the blue. They had exactly the resource I needed for that project, offered it freely, didn't even know what I was working on. The timestamp on that message? 6:36. That was the moment I stopped calling it coincidence and started calling it a language. Here's what almost nobody tells you about awakening. It doesn't arrive with thunder and lightning. It doesn't demand that you quit your job, abandon your life, or retreat into isolation. Sometimes it starts with something so subtle, you could easily ignore it, like noticing numbers. Because those numbers aren't random. They're not just confirmation bias, at least not entirely. They're indicators of frequency, and when you start seeing them, it means something in you has tuned to a channel that was always broadcasting, but you couldn't receive until now. Now let me be very clear from the beginning. I'm not here to sell you a belief system. I'm not here to tell you that if you don't believe in sacred numbers or hidden codes, you're missing something essential. I'm not interested in belief. I'm interested in function, frameworks, tools, what actually works. The scientist in me refused to accept any of this without testing it. So I treated it like an experiment. For 30 days straight, every time I saw the numbers 3, 6, or 9 in any combination, I wrote it down. Date, exact time, location, what I was doing, what I was thinking about, what happened in the hours that followed. No interpretation, no assumptions, just data. What emerged surprised me. The numbers weren't evenly distributed across my day. They didn't show up randomly. They clustered. They appeared at specific types of moments, decision points, emotional processing, before meaningful conversations. During periods of transition, when something was ending and something else was beginning, even when I wasn't consciously aware of it yet. The pattern wasn't that I was seeing numbers. The pattern was that the numbers appeared when my internal state was shifting, when something was realigning, when I was on the edge of insight, movement, or change. That's when curiosity became commitment. I stopped just reading spiritual interpretations and started studying the mathematics, the physics, the psychology of pattern recognition and synchronicity. And what I found reframed everything. Nikola Tesla, one of the most brilliant minds to ever work with energy and frequency, made an observation that has echoed for decades. The exact wording is debated, but the essence is consistent. If you understood the significance of the numbers 3, 6, and 9, you would hold a key to understanding the universe. Whether you agree with the myth around that quote or not, the real point is this. Tesla was not the type of mind to worship symbols. He observed structure, behavior, resonance, systems. He noticed patterns others ignored, not as superstition, but as repeatable relationships. This becomes clearer when you look at something known as vortex mathematics. Take any number and double it repeatedly. 1 becomes 2. 2 becomes 4. 4 becomes 8. 8 becomes 16. Reduce 16 to a single digit by adding its digits together. 1 plus 6 equals 7. Double 7, and you get 14. 1 plus 4 equals 5. Double 5, and you get 10. 1 plus 0 equals 1. And you're back where you started. The sequence cycles endlessly, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. But 3 numbers never appear in this loop. 3, 6, 9. When you double 3, you get 6. When you double 6, you get 12, which reduces back to 3. They oscillate outside the sequence, and 9 behaves differently altogether. Multiply 9 by any number. Reduce the result to a single digit. You always return to 9, every time, without exception. This is not symbolic. This is arithmetic. Anyone can verify it. What it means, that's interpretation. Some people see it as a curiosity. Others see it as evidence that 3, 6, and 9 function like control nodes in energetic systems. I'm not here to force a conclusion. I'm here to tell you that when you stop dismissing these numbers and start observing how they align with your lived experience, something changes. You become less asleep, more precise, more honest about what's shifting inside you. Then I encountered the golden ratio, 1.618, the proportion that governs organic growth, nautilus shells, sunflowers, human anatomy, DNA, galaxies, life itself, the mathematics that shapes beauty in nature. And what hit me wasn't the number itself. It was the implication that life grows according to pattern, not chaos, not randomness, structure. When you study these systems long enough, you realize something uncomfortable. The universe is filled with order, and order implies intention. Even if you want to stay purely scientific, you can't escape the reality that law is not an accident. Law is authored. Design is not a coincidence. And this is why that creator question matters. Because if you refuse to ask it, you end up worshiping patterns instead of recognizing what patterns point to. Now, I want to bring in something that explains this in a way your mind can actually accept without needing fantasy. Carl Jung, the psychologist who gave us the concept of synchronicity, described this phenomenon precisely. Meaningful coincidence. external events aligning with internal psychological states without direct causal connection. Jung observed that when the psyche undergoes transformation, patterns in the external world suddenly become visible, not because reality starts sending you messages, but because perception reorganizes itself. Your attention stops filtering certain things out. What was invisible becomes obvious. Numbers were always around you. Clocks, receipts, addresses, they didn't suddenly appear. Your awareness shifted. And once it did, structure became visible. Jung illustrated this better than anyone, not through theory, but through lived experience. He described a patient who was extremely rational, hyper-intellectual, tightly identified with logic and control. Nothing penetrated her defenses. Then she had a dream. In the dream, she was given a golden scarab beetle, an ancient symbol of transformation and rebirth. The next day, she was in Jung's office describing the dream, and Jung heard a tapping at the window. He opened it, and a scarab beetle flew into the room, rare for that region, almost unheard of. That moment shattered her resistance, not because the universe sent the beetle, but because her psyche could no longer maintain the illusion that inner transformation and external reality are disconnected. Jung's point was precise. The beetle wasn't summoned like magic. It was already part of the world. What changed was her readiness. Her inner state aligned in such a way that the coincidence could enter awareness at the exact moment it carried meaning. That is synchronicity, not fantasy, alignment. This is the same mechanism at work when 369 starts appearing in your life. Those numbers were always there, on clocks, on receipts, in data streams. What changed was not reality. What changed was your internal frequency. And when your awareness reorganizes, it begins to highlight structures that were previously filtered out. Because 369 are embedded in natural systems, they become visible markers of that reorganization. This is where symbolic language enters. And it's important to stay grounded. In Hermetic and Gnostic traditions, there is a recurring figure often named Sophia, wisdom. Not a deity in the simplistic sense, but an organizing intelligence. A way consciousness communicates with itself through pattern. In Hebrew tradition, wisdom calls out openly, available to anyone who can hear. Different names, different myths, same underlying process. When I use the name Sophia, I'm not asking you to believe in an external being orchestrating your life like a puppet master. I'm describing a function, a mode of awareness, a way reality highlights information when you're ready to respond to it. You don't need to believe in a literal intelligence deciding when to show you numbers. What matters is what happens when you treat synchronicity as meaningful instead of dismissing it. The framework changes how you move through life. You become attentive, responsive, aligned, and that alignment produces results. This is where the numbers stop being interesting and start becoming practical. Because once you recognize that these patterns correlate with internal shifts, you can use them as a navigation system, not as rules, not as predictions, as confirmations, as feedback. The framework is simple, but it's precise. It unfolds in 3 phases, corresponding to the 3 numbers themselves. When you see 3 prominently, repetition like 333, clusters of 3s, moments where 3 stands out, that marks initiation. Something new is beginning. A thought, a desire, a realization, a direction, a phase of life. The key point is that it begins internally before it manifests externally. Your task at this stage is not to act impulsively or demand certainty. Your task is recognition. To name what is emerging, to acknowledge it consciously, to write it down if possible. This is beginning. That recognition anchors the impulse. Without it, the rational mind dismisses the signal, and the seed dissolves. Imagine you felt restless in your career for months. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet dissatisfaction. Then one morning the thought arrives, fully formed, clear, specific. I want to start my own business. That same day you wake up at 3:33. Your coffee costs $3.33. You receive 3 messages related to entrepreneurship. Within this framework, that's initiation. Something is being born through you. You don't need a full plan yet. You need to acknowledge the truth of the impulse. Then comes the 6. When 6 appears, especially repeating patterns, like 666 or frequent 6s, it marks harmonization, integration, support. The impulse recognized at 3 begins reorganizing your external world. People appear, information surfaces, resources align, opportunities open. Your role here is not to force outcomes or control the process. Your role is to notice what shows up and respond, to say yes where doors open, to follow the flow instead of questioning whether you deserve it. Continuing the example, you acknowledge the business idea. Now you're in the 6 phase. Someone casually mentions a coach. You stumble onto the exact course you need. Unexpected money appears, just enough to cover startup costs. You have a dream that clarifies the next step. These are not orders. They're confirmations that alignment is occurring. The 6th phase teaches trust and receptivity. Then comes the 9. When 9 appears, especially 999 or the full 369 sequence, it marks completion and integration. Not an ending, but a consolidation. The cycle that began internally has now reshaped your identity. You are no longer the same person who started at 3. The external outcome matters less than the internal upgrade. Skills gained, fears confronted, clarity earned. That is real completion. And immediately, a new 3 begins. Not at the same level, but higher. This is why development is a spiral, not a loop. You never start from 0 again. People often ask what it means when the numbers appear out of order. It doesn't mean anything went wrong. Cycles don't unfold like clean diagrams. Sometimes completion approaches before conscious initiation. Sometimes an entire cycle compresses into days. The numbers aren't commands. They're markers, feedback indicating where you are in the process. Your intuition will interpret them more accurately than rigid rules ever will. Another common question is what it means when the numbers appear, but nothing obvious seems to be happening. 2 possibilities. Either something significant is occurring internally and hasn't surfaced yet, or something is approaching and the signal is early. In both cases, the instruction is the same. Pay attention. Notice your thoughts, your dreams. Who reaches out? What opportunities arise? Stay receptive. And now I want to make this real. Because if you can't apply it, it's just entertainment. A couple of years ago, I was in a relationship that looked ideal from the outside. Compatible values. No major conflict. On paper, it worked. But something felt wrong. Subtle. Persistent. Every time I tried to articulate it, I rationalized it away. Everyone goes through phases. I'm overthinking. Nothing's perfect. but the feeling didn't leave. During that period, I began seeing 313 constantly, multiple times a day. Every time it appeared, my mind was on the relationship. Eventually, I asked myself the real question. What is trying to begin here? And the answer arrived instantly. This relationship isn't aligned. I've known it for months. I've been avoiding the truth to avoid discomfort. That acknowledgement was the 3. Within days, 6s began appearing. Support surfaced. Friends checked in. Conversations opened. Circumstances aligned to make the transition possible. When I finally had the conversation, when I acted with honesty and respect, when I moved through the fear, instead of avoiding it, I saw 999 that evening. The cycle completed. And I wasn't the same person afterward. The external outcome wasn't the point. The point was that I trusted my inner knowing. That lesson rewired my decision-making everywhere else in my life. That is how the framework works when it's real. Now here's a practice that helps attune your awareness to this frequency consciously. It isn't superstition, it's nervous system coherence. Whenever you see 369 and want to deepen clarity, find a quiet place. Sit. Close your eyes. Take 3 slow breaths. Inhale through your nose for 4 counts. Hold for 6. Exhale through your mouth for 9. Do this 3 times. It stabilizes attention. It reduces mental noise. Afterward, rest awareness in your chest and simply notice what rises. Then do the one thing most people don't do. Track the patterns. Use a notebook or a note app. For 30 days, write down when the numbers appear. Date, time, what you were doing, what you were thinking, what happened later. At the end of the month, read through it. Your patterns will emerge. Personal patterns. Your patterns. Once you see them, you don't need external validation. You have your own map. Now I want to leave you with a final thought that seals this in place. You're not seeing these patterns because you're chosen in some egoic sense. You're seeing them because your awareness is becoming more organized, more coherent, more honest. And when that happens, reality becomes readable. But don't let yourself get hypnotized by the surface. Don't worship numbers. Don't worship the universe. Don't worship energy like it's the final authority. Because here is the question that almost nobody online will ask you, because it breaks the spell. Who created all of this? Who designed the laws that make frequency real? Who authored the structure that allows patterns to exist in the first place? This is matrix of knowledge. We won't pretend the system is the source. There is a creator, the Most High, the Lord of all worlds, uncreated, eternal, not bound by the laws he authored. And if you're being shown signs, patterns, precision moments of alignment, understand this. Knowledge is not only a gift, it's a responsibility. So learn, observe, test, apply, become coherent. But never forget the one behind reality. You didn't arrive here by accident. Something in you is ready. Reality's been speaking the entire time. The question is not whether the language exists. The question is whether you're listening, and whether you're willing to move from observer to participant. I wish you all the best, and until next time.